The brass railings of the yacht shimmered beneath the late May sun, each reflection scattering like liquid gold over the water. I stood at the top of the gangway, my hands folded in front of me, forcing myself to breathe slowly. My heart was thudding harder than I cared to admit. For 2 months, I had rehearsed this moment, dreamt about it even, and now that it was here, I felt like a young woman again, waiting for a verdict that might change the rest of her life. The Serenity lay at anchor in Newport Marina, her white hull gleaming like a swan among the forest of masts and sails. She was a 45-foot yacht, elegant without being ostentatious, polished teak deck stretching out in gleaming lines. Every inch of her whispered of craftsmanship, of journeys waiting to be made, of a life I had secretly built while the world assumed I was just an aging widow spending her days knitting and tending roses. My daughter Emily appeared at the top of the pier first, clutching the arm of her husband, Jason. He walked with that unmistakable swagger of his, as though the world had been built merely to admire him. Behind them followed his parents, Paul and Helen, kind enough people who always seemed quietly embarrassed by their son's arrogance. "Wow," Jason said immediately as he stepped aboard, his expensive loafers clicking on the teak. "Would you look at this thing? A floating palace." He ran his manicured fingers along the leather seating, then turned to me with that half smile I had come to know too well. "So tell me, Maggie, how does a retired school teacher manage to afford something like this? Don't tell me you spent your life savings on a weekend rental." I felt the sting in his words, though I had prepared myself for it. He never called me Mom, never even Margaret, always Maggie, said with that particular curl of disdain, as though shortening my name diminished me somehow. Emily shifted uncomfortably, her cheeks flushing pink. "Jason," she murmured. "Please." But he only chuckled. "What? I'm just curious. This little getaway probably costs more than most people make in a year." He gestured at the polished chrome fixtures. "Kind of an odd choice for someone on a fixed income, don't you think?" Emily finally looked at me. "Mom, you didn't—" She hesitated, biting her lip. "You didn't spend all of Dad's insurance money on this, did you?" Her voice trembled with embarrassment, not excitement. I had imagined her eyes shining with joy, gratitude, maybe even tears when I revealed the truth. Instead, she was clutching her purse like a lifeline, afraid I had lost my mind. Helen, bless her, tried to ease the tension. "It's a beautiful yacht, Margaret. Thank you for inviting us." Paul nodded in agreement, his eyes roaming appreciatively over the deck. "You're very welcome," I said, forcing steadiness into my tone. "I thought it would be nice for us to spend a weekend together. Just family, away from the usual noise." Jason gave a low laugh. "Family time, huh? On a yacht rental? Well, I suppose everyone has their midlife crisis." He tapped a finger against the navigation console. "This system alone probably costs more than your car. What's the damage? 10 grand for the weekend?" The words cut sharper than I expected. He had no idea that I had built businesses quietly, invested wisely, chosen to live simply while others measured success by designer suits and showy cars. To Jason, my khakis and modest home made me pitiable, someone playing at wealth I didn't have. Emily touched his arm lightly. "Maybe don't," she whispered, though her eyes refused to meet mine. "Why don't you explore below deck?" I suggested, trying to mask the tightness in my chest. "I'll prepare refreshments." Jason smirked, already striding toward the stairs. "Come on, babe. Let's see how much your mom spent on this little fantasy weekend." Their voices drifted up from below deck, Jason's laughter, Emily's nervous giggle, the sounds of cabinet doors opening and closing. Each word of his commentary rose like smoke through the hatch. Marble countertops. Unreal. Can you believe this? She must have spent a fortune. Totally irresponsible. I gripped the brass railing until my knuckles whitened. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I had imagined my daughter's delight, her husband's grudging respect, maybe even a rare moment of connection between us. Instead, I stood there listening to them mock me, a stranger in my own story. The La Banco, mounted near the helm, polished until it gleamed, caught the afternoon light. My husband had given it to me on our 15th anniversary, saying, "When you don't know where you're going, trust this to point you home." I brushed my fingers lightly across it now, feeling its steady presence. Navigation began with knowing where you stood, and in this moment, I stood alone. Paul's voice broke through my thoughts. He had come to stand beside me, his tone quiet but sincere. It really is magnificent, Maggie. Extraordinary craftsmanship. Helen joined him, smiling gently. That dining table below is like something from a museum. Their kindness steadied me, but Jason's laughter echoing from the cabin was a needle under my skin. I lifted my chin, squared my shoulders, and whispered silently to myself. They don't know the truth yet. Let them laugh now. Their time will come. The sun glittered across the harbor, but the warmth I had imagined for this weekend was already slipping through my fingers. Jason's commentary from below deck rose with every passing second, each remark sharper than the last. By the time they climbed back up to the main deck, my smile felt like a brittle mask stretched too tightly across my face. Unbelievable, Jason said, sweeping an arm across the polished teak. Seriously, Maggie, this is comedy gold. People on Social Security don't usually play yacht club. He dropped into one of the deck chairs like he owned it, tipping his sunglasses down to peer at me. Tell me, did the rental company give you a senior discount? Paul stiffened, and Helen's smile faltered. Emily flushed scarlet and fiddled with her bracelet. Jason, she murmured. I steadied my voice. I thought it would be nice to spend time together, a change of scenery. Jason chuckled, reaching for the chilled wine I had set on the table. He poured himself a generous glass without asking. A change of scenery is mini golf, Maggie. Maybe a weekend cabin rental. This? He gestured at the sweeping deck. This is delusion. How much debt did you rack up for this fantasy? Emily's head snapped toward him. Jason, that's enough. But he ignored her, turning his smirk back on me. Look, I get it. You want to feel successful? Who doesn't? But when the credit card bills come, don't expect Emily and me to bail you out. We've got our own financial goals. The words landed like stones in my chest. I remembered every tuition check I had written, every emergency expense I had quietly covered, the down payment on their house. And now he sat here on my yacht, warning me not to burden him with debts that didn't exist. Helen cleared her throat gently. It's a lovely gesture, Margaret. Really, you shouldn't feel you need to explain yourself. Jason leaned back, swirling his wine. No explanation needed. We all know this is a rental. A pretty one, sure, but still. He flashed that wolfish smile of his. Honestly, the only surprising thing is that you managed to get the reservation before someone else snapped it up. I busied myself arranging the lunch I had prepared. Grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, fresh salad. Every detail had been chosen with care. Bone china plates, crystal glasses, silver utensils, my attempt to create an atmosphere of elegance and warmth. Yet Jason managed to twist even that into mockery. Lunch on a yacht, he said, clapping his hands in exaggerated delight. Living the dream. Too bad it's only for a weekend. Jason, Paul said quietly, a note of steel in his voice. Enough. But Jason only smirked, cutting into his salmon. What? I'm just appreciating the finer things. Isn't that what family's for? To share experiences? He shot me a look that dripped with irony. Especially when someone's playing millionaire. Emily shifted in her seat, her eyes darting between us. It's delicious, Mom, she offered weakly, taking a small bite. Of course it is, Jason replied before I could. When you've got all day with nothing else to do, you can perfect salmon. His tone made nothing else to do sound like a sin. I set my fork down carefully. My husband used to call this my storm face, the expression I wore when fury boiled beneath the surface, but I refused to let it spill over. Across the table, Helen's hand trembled as she reached for her glass. Paul's jaw tightened, disappointment etched across his face. Jason raised his glass in mock cheer. To family adventures we can't afford. The words sliced through the air. A silence settled, heavy and uncomfortable, broken only by the soft lapping of waves against the hull. I looked at him then, really looked. His smug confidence, the curl of contempt in his smile, the way he leaned back as if this yacht already belonged to him. And I realized, with a cold clarity that surprised even me, that I had been naive. I had thought generosity could heal old wounds, that giving my daughter and her husband something extraordinary might build a bridge back to the closeness I longed for. Instead, my gift had only revealed the rot beneath. That's enough, I said softly, but with a firmness that turned heads. Jason raised his brows theatrically. Oh, did I hit a nerve? You're a guest on this yacht, I said, my voice as steady as I could make it. You will show respect, or you will leave. For the first time that day, his smirk faltered. Emily gasped softly. Paul leaned back, his eyes narrowing in approval. Helen looked at me with something close to relief. Then Jason laughed, loud and forced. Respect? Maggie, come on, we're family. I'm just keeping it real. Somebody has to. No, I replied evenly. You're mocking, and there's a difference. The table was silent. Jason leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a flicker of irritation tightening his jaw. Emily stared down at her plate, torn between loyalty to her husband and shame at his behavior. Inside, a storm raged, but outwardly I remained calm. Because one thing was certain now. Jason thought he was playing a clever game. He had no idea I had been playing it longer, and far better, than he could ever imagine. The meal ended in brittle silence. Forks clinked against plates, glasses touched the tablecloth too carefully, as if everyone feared that the wrong sound might shatter the fragile civility I had just imposed. Emily kept her head down, pushing roasted vegetables across her plate without eating. Paul and Helen made valiant attempts at small talk, asking about the weather, about the marina. But their words dissolved into the heavy air like raindrops on hot stone. Jason was the only one who seemed entirely at ease. He leaned back in his chair, sipping the last of the Chardonnay as if he were the host of this gathering, not the ungracious guest. His eyes flicked over the polished surfaces, the gleaming wood, the subtle details that spoke of money he was certain I didn't have. Finally, he rose with a stretch. Well, I think I'll take a little tour, he said lightly, already moving toward the cabin stairs. Check out the galley. See what kind of kitchen this rental comes with. Jason, Emily said quickly, almost too quickly. Maybe stay here. The view is beautiful. He smirked, patting her shoulder. Relax, babe. I'm just curious. Don't you want to know what your mom's spending all this money on? I watched him disappear below deck, every instinct inside me coiled tight. Something in his tone, too casual, too knowing, raised the hairs at the back of my neck. Jason didn't explore out of curiosity. He prowled, searching for leverage. I forced myself to remain seated, chatting with Helen about the flowers she had noticed along the marina, but my mind was elsewhere. From below, faint sounds drifted up, the creak of cabinets, the muted thud of drawers sliding open. Then something sharper, a metallic scrape, followed by a grinding noise that made my stomach drop. Paul frowned, tilting his head. "Odd sound," he murmured. I excused myself with a smile that felt like paper stretched too thin. "I'll just check on him." But I didn't go directly to the galley. Instead, I slipped into the navigation room tucked behind the cabin, where a panel of small monitors waited in quiet readiness. The yacht's security system was something I had insisted on, a precaution after reading about thefts in the marina. 8 cameras covered the interior and deck, discreet enough that guests rarely noticed. I tapped the screen, rewinding to just after Jason's descent. There he was, swaggering into the galley, glancing around to make sure he was alone. He tested the faucet once, twice. Perfectly functional, water streaming clear and stopping cleanly. Then he gripped it with both hands and twisted. Hard. The camera caught every motion. The violent wrench, the sharp crack as metal gave way, the satisfied smirk spreading across his face when the water began to gush uncontrollably. He braced his foot against the cabinet, wrenching again until the internal valve snapped completely. I leaned closer, fury rising like a tide. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate sabotage. Jason grabbed a dish towel from a drawer, wiping at the base of the faucet, even running a finger along the chrome to check for evidence. Methodical. Calculated. When he finally stepped back, water streamed in an uncontrolled arc. Exactly the kind of embarrassing rental problem he had mocked about earlier. His grin said everything. Victory. I copied the footage to a small drive and slipped it into my pocket. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the cold certainty of betrayal. For years, I had written checks, signed over gifts, poured love and money into Emily's life. Jason had smiled, accepted, promised gratitude. And this was the truth behind the smile. A man willing to break what wasn't his, just to prove me small. When I returned to the main deck, Jason was already climbing the stairs, shaking his head with exaggerated dismay. "Well, Maggie," he announced, "looks like your little rental has a problem. Faucet down there's shot. Handle won't turn off properly. Must be one of those quirks of old boats." Emily's eyes widened. "Mom, is that true?" Jason shrugged, playing the concerned son-in-law. "These things happen. Rental equipment gets abused. You probably won't get anyone to fix it on a weekend. Guess we'll just have to live with it." Paul's brow furrowed. "Strange. Those scratches at the base looked fresh, almost like tool marks." Jason was quick, too quick. "Previous renters probably tried fixing it themselves. You know how amateurs make things worse." He gave a sympathetic smile, turning it into a performance. "Don't worry, Maggie. I can take a look later. Maybe patch it up." "Thank you," I said calmly, though my voice carried an edge only he seemed to catch. His smile faltered for half a second before returning. As the others settled back into their chairs, I excused myself once more. "I'll check the maintenance manual, see what the manufacturer recommends." In the privacy of the cabin, I allowed myself one moment of pure, crystalline rage. My fists clenched at my sides. Jason thought he was clever, that I would be humiliated, forced to call the marina for help like some helpless old woman playing at luxury. But he had no idea that he had just stepped into a game he couldn't possibly win. I fetched the yacht's toolkit, my movements precise, practiced. Years of raising a family had taught me how to fix things others broke. Twisted metal, forced threads. damage meant to embarrass me. But like every trial in my life, I would repair it, stronger than before. And when the time came, I would show Jason exactly what kind of woman he had chosen to underestimate. The galley was quiet, except for the hiss of water spilling from the broken faucet. I crouched beside the sink, the toolbox open at my knees. The smell of metal and salt filled the air. My fingers moved automatically, unscrewing fittings, prying loose the twisted valve, checking for damage that could be repaired. I had done this kind of work before. Not on yachts, perhaps, but in kitchens and bathrooms when money was tight and calling a professional wasn't an option. As I worked, memories surfaced like bubbles from the deep. Emily's tuition checks, written late at night with trembling hands but steady conviction. The down payment for their house, nearly $60,000, signed away with a smile and the thought, this will give her security. Jason's words from those days. You're incredible, Maggie. We'll never forget this. Never forget? He had forgotten, or maybe he had never meant it at all. My wrench slipped against the pipe, and for a moment I froze, breathing through the hot sting of betrayal. The valve came free at last, revealing the cruel marks of pliers and brute force. Not the wear of time, not the stress of salt water. This was vandalism. My hands steadied as I replaced the gasket, fitted a new washer, and tightened the seal with a measured precision. 20 minutes later, the faucet flowed again, smooth as glass. Better than before. I wiped my hands on a clean rag, straightened, and caught my reflection in the polished chrome. My face looked older than I remembered, lined by years of sacrifice. But my eyes were sharper, harder. Above deck, Jason's voice floated down with false concern. Think she needs a hand down there? She's been at it a while. Paul's reply was calm but firm. She can manage. You'd do better to give her space. I almost smiled. At least someone still believed in me. I carried the repaired fixture in my mind like a trophy as I walked back to the dining area. Jason leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, wearing the smug expression of a man certain of victory. There she is, he said, pitching his voice loud enough for everyone. How'd the repair go? I was just telling them these rental companies cut corners. Probably haven't serviced that faucet in years. I set a small tablet on the table with deliberate care. Actually, Jason, I said, my tone even, I wanted to ask you something about that faucet. He feigned surprise, eyebrows climbing. Me? I'm no plumber, Maggie, though I did notice it looked corroded. Poor maintenance, I'd guess. Emily shifted uncomfortably. Mom, Jason was only trying to help. He mentioned the water pressure seemed off. I met his eyes, holding his gaze steady. Is that what he mentioned? Jason's smirk didn't falter, but I saw the flicker behind it, a calculation, a twitch of unease. He leaned back farther, spreading his arms like a man at ease. That's right, just trying to be helpful. Paul cleared his throat, sensing the storm gathering. Maybe we should call a technician. It's safer. No, I said quietly. What's safer is knowing the truth. The room hushed. Even the yacht seemed to hold its breath. Jason gave a forced laugh. The truth? Maggie, it's a faucet. What truth could there possibly be? I powered on the tablet. The screen glowed, bathing the table in cold blue light. The yacht has a security system, I said, watching his face carefully. 8 cameras, high definition, with audio. The blood drained from his cheeks, just slightly, but enough for me to see. Emily frowned. Mom, is that really necessary? Paul's voice carried authority. Yes. Let's see what happened. I tapped the screen. The video played. Jason entering the galley, glancing around to make sure he was alone. The faucet working perfectly. His hands gripping the handle, twisting violently until the mechanism snapped. The smirk, the dish towel wiping evidence away. Helen gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God!" Paul's jaw hardened. "Jason, what the hell were you thinking?" Emily's eyes widened, disbelief spilling across her face. "Jason, tell me this isn't real." Jason's mask slipped, then snapped back into place. "It's not what it looks like. I was trying to fix it, and it broke, and I panicked." Paul shook his head. "We all saw it. You destroyed it on purpose." The silence was deafening. Jason's confident smirk was gone now, replaced by the twitch of a cornered man. He glanced at Emily, searching for support, but she only stared at the screen, her hand trembling against her wine glass. I closed the tablet slowly, the weight of it heavy in my hands. "That's the truth," I said softly. "And that was just a faucet." Jason swallowed hard, his jaw working, but no words came. For the first time since stepping onto this yacht, he looked small. Jason's chair scraped harshly against the deck as he half stood, half sat, caught between fight and flight. His face was pale, his smirk long gone, replaced by the look of a gambler who had just realized the deck was stacked against him. "Look," he stammered, his voice a beat too loud. I made a mistake, okay? I got frustrated. Maybe I used too much force. But come on, Maggie's acting like I burned the boat down. It's a rental yacht. The insurance will cover it." The words hung in the air, thick and ugly. Emily's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes darted between me and her husband, confusion and shame warring on her face. Paul leaned forward, his voice sharp with disappointment. "Rental or not, Jason, you destroyed someone else's property, deliberately. There's no excuse for that." Helen dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. "I can't believe what I just saw. Jason, how could you?" Jason rounded on me again, desperate now. "Come on, Maggie. You don't seriously expect us to treat this like some crime? It's a cheap faucet, and you—" He jabbed a finger in my direction. "You're playing pretend. A retired widow renting a yacht to show off? You don't belong here, and you know it." "Jason!" Emily's voice cracked like glass. "Stop it!" But he was too far gone. "No, Emily. Someone has to say it. People like your mom don't own yachts like this. She doesn't even belong at a yacht club. This—" He waved his arms wide at the teak, the chrome, the polished wood. "This is for people who've earned it." A silence fell heavier than any storm. Even the waves seemed to pause against the hull. I felt my pulse steady, my breath slow, because finally, the moment had come. I stood, my chair pushing back with deliberate calm. "Jason," I said, my voice quiet but cutting through the stillness like a blade. "This is my yacht." The words landed like thunder. His mouth opened, then closed. Emily gasped audibly. Paul sat back, stunned, while Helen's hand froze mid-air, still clutching her napkin. "Your... what?" Jason croaked. "My yacht," I repeated clearly. "The Serenity, purchased in March, paid in full." "That's impossible." He was shaking his head so violently it was almost comical. "There's no way. Something like this is, what, 2 million? 3? 3.1, I answered, watching his face drain of color. "Cash." Jason staggered back a step, as if the deck had tilted beneath him. You can't be serious." Emily's voice trembled. "Mom, is this true?" I nodded. "Yes, it's registered in my name. The Coast Guard has the paperwork. The marina charges my card every month for the slip fees. The insurance policy lists me as sole owner. There's no rental company. This yacht belongs to me." Emily pressed a hand to her chest, her eyes filling with tears. But why didn't you tell us?" I looked at her, my throat tightening. Because I wanted this to be a surprise. I thought if you spent a weekend on it first, fell in love with it, then I could tell you the truth. That it was meant as a gift. The word hung there. Gift. Jason blinked, his face a mask of disbelief. A gift? Yes. My gaze never left his. For you and Emily? For both of you. I wanted to give you something extraordinary. Something that might bring our family closer again. Helen let out a soft sob. Paul closed his eyes, shaking his head slowly. Jason's mouth worked soundlessly. Emily was crying openly now, her napkin clutched to her lips. A gift? She whispered. Mom, you were going to give us this yacht? I was, I said. That was the plan. The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye turned to Jason, the man who had spent the afternoon mocking, sabotaging, belittling, and who now realized he had just spat on the very gift that could have made him wealthy beyond his imagination. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. Wait, you said was, past tense. I inclined my head slightly. Yes, was, because I can no longer give something so precious to someone who disrespects me so deeply. The color drained from his face entirely. No, Maggie, wait. You don't mean that. I didn't know. If I had known... I cut him off, my voice calm as ice. If you had known I owned it, you would have treated me with respect. But because you thought I was just a poor old woman renting above her means, you thought cruelty was acceptable. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. Emily's sob broke through the air. Jason turned desperately toward her. Come on, you know I didn't mean it like that. But she could only shake her head, her tears falling fast. And for the first time all weekend, I felt something close to peace. Jason's face twitched between defiance and panic, like a mask cracking under heat. He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally burst out. This is insane! You'd really throw away a gift like this over one stupid mistake? Over a faucet? Paul's voice was sharp, almost unrecognizable. Stupid mistake? Jason, we all saw the footage. That wasn't a mistake. That was vandalism, and you mocked her the entire day. Helen dabbed at her eyes, whispering, I can't believe my son would do this. Jason ignored them, focusing on me like a drowning man clutches at driftwood. Maggie, listen. I was wrong, okay? I shouldn't have said those things. I shouldn't have touched the faucet. But you can't just take back a promise like that. You wanted us to have this yacht. You wanted Emily to have it. His words were frantic, tumbling over themselves. For once, the arrogance was gone. What remained was raw desperation. Emily wiped at her wet cheeks, her voice trembling. Mom, please, I know Jason messed up, but... She stopped, her throat tightening. He's still my husband. We can make this right, can't we? I looked at her, my daughter, my only child, and in that moment, my heart broke in ways Jason's insults never could. Because she wasn't defending me, she was defending him. Emily, I said softly, do you realize what he's done? Not just to the yacht, but to us? To you and me? Her eyes darted to Jason, then back to me. Her silence was answer enough. Jason seized the pause, leaning forward, his tone shifting into something he must have thought was persuasive. Look, Maggie, you've always been generous, right? Paying for Emily's tuition, helping with our house, bailing us out when things were tight. You've always been there. Don't let one bad afternoon erase all of that. Think of the future. Think of what this yacht could mean for us, for Emily. I tilted my head, studying him. For Emily or for you? He flinched, then forced a laugh. For both of us, of course. We're a team. Paul's fist came down on the table, rattling the silverware. Enough. Jason, You've embarrassed yourself in this family more than I can say. Stop digging." Jason's jaw clenched, his face reddening. But still he pressed on, his words spilling faster, desperate to control the narrative. "You don't understand, Maggie. I've been under pressure at work. The consulting business is brutal. I acted out. I was stupid. But that doesn't change the fact that Emily deserves this. She's your daughter." Emily clutched his arm, tears streaking down her face. "Jason, stop, please." I straightened, feeling a clarity I hadn't in years. "You're right about one thing, Jason. Emily is my daughter, which is why I wanted this yacht to be hers. But gifts aren't owed, they're offered freely, and they can be withdrawn when respect is absent." Jason's mouth fell open. "You can't be serious." "I am." My voice was calm, steady. "The yacht remains mine. The gift is off the table, permanently." Emily's sob broke through the air, raw and jagged. "Mom, please, don't do this. Don't take it back." I reached for her hand across the table, but she pulled away, pressing closer to Jason. That hurt more than any insult ever could. "You made your choice today," I whispered. "And it wasn't me." Emily's lips trembled, her breath hitching. Jason wrapped an arm around her shoulder, glaring at me as if I had wronged him. "Fine," he spat. "Keep your damn yacht. We don't need it. We'll build our own future." Paul's voice was ice. "With what, Jason? Lies and sabotage?" Helen shook her head, her face pale. "You don't even hear yourself." Jason pushed back his chair abruptly, the legs screeching against the teak. "Come on, Em. We're done here." Emily lingered a moment, her tear-stained eyes meeting mine. For a heartbeat, I thought she might stay, that she might see Jason for what he was. But then she lowered her gaze and followed him toward the gangway. I watched them walk down the dock, Jason's voice sharp and angry, Emily silent and small beside him. Each step was a dagger. Behind me, Paul exhaled heavily. "Margaret, I am so sorry. No parent should endure what you just did." Helen touched my arm gently. "You don't deserve this. None of it." I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a small smile. "Thank you. But maybe it's better this way. At least now I know the truth." Paul poured 3 glasses of wine, sliding one toward me. "Then let's toast to that, to truth." I lifted my glass, my hand steady at last. "To truth," I echoed, and as the sun dipped lower, painting the water in amber and gold, I felt the weight inside me shift. Not gone, but changed. The grief was real, yes, but so was the peace that comes when pretense finally ends. The deck felt strangely quiet after Jason and Emily left, their footsteps fading down the pier. The laughter, the mocking tone, the cutting remarks, gone, leaving only the gentle slap of waves against the hull and the faint creak of ropes tugging against their cleats. For a long moment, I simply stood there, one hand resting on the brass compass mounted near the helm, letting the silence settle. Paul and Helen remained seated at the table, their faces drawn tight with shame and worry. But I wasn't ready to face their pity. I needed air. So I walked to the bow, leaning against the railing, the marina sprawling before me like a stage after the curtain has fallen. It was in moments like this that memory came creeping in, uninvited. One by one, the sacrifices I had made rose up, vivid as if they'd happened yesterday. I remembered Emily at 16, her face pale as she showed me the acceptance letter to the summer business program she'd dreamed about. "It's too expensive," she'd whispered, almost ashamed to even want it. I had worked 2 extra shifts at the community center, sold the last of my jewelry from my grandmother, and wrote the check without hesitation. Emily had hugged me so tightly, I thought my ribs might break. "You're the best mom in the world," she had said. At 23, it was grad school tuition. Jason had just come into the picture then, all charm and ambition. They'd sat together at my kitchen table, his hand on hers, telling me how badly she wanted the MBA, how it would set up their future. $40,000. I had transferred it in installments, my hands trembling each time I logged into the bank. Jason had thanked me with his practiced smile, promising, "We'll never forget what you've done for us." But they had forgotten. Or perhaps they had never meant it. The wedding came next. Lavish, expensive, beyond what Emily could have managed. $25,000 I contributed, insisting she deserved the white dress, the photographs, the perfect venue. That night, alone in my room, I had spoken to the photo of my late husband, telling him, "I did my best. She's happy. That's all that matters." 2 years later, a down payment on their house. Jason's business was struggling. He spun tales about temporary cash flow, better loan terms with a bigger deposit. $60,000 slid from my account into theirs, with a smile and a hug, and the same empty promise. "We'll pay you back someday." Of course, repayment never came. Gratitude barely lingered beyond the first month. There had been smaller things too. $5,000 for emergency car repairs, $3,000 when Emily needed surgery, endless birthdays and Christmases where my gifts outstripped theirs by a mile. It added up, piece by piece, to nearly $140,000. A lifetime of savings, funneled quietly into their lives. And yet, here I stood on a $3 million yacht, mocked like a foolish old woman, called pretentious, treated like a liability. Paul's voice came gently from behind me. "Margaret, you don't have to carry this alone." I turned, realizing my cheeks were wet. I hadn't even noticed the tears falling. Helen had joined him, her small hand clasping his. They both looked at me not with pity, but with something deeper. Respect. "You've given so much," Helen said softly. "Too much, maybe, and they've taken it for granted." I nodded slowly, wiping my cheeks. I thought if I kept giving, eventually they'd see me. Not as a burden, not as some old woman who didn't matter, but as a mother, as family. Paul's jaw tightened. Jason doesn't understand the first thing about family. He only understands advantage, and he lost his greatest advantage today. His words struck a chord inside me. Yes, Jason had lost something more valuable than the yacht itself. He had lost my trust, my goodwill, my belief in him. And once gone, those things were not so easily restored. I walked back toward the table, settling into my chair. The untouched wine gleamed amber in the fading light. "Do you know what the cruelest part is?" I asked quietly. Helen leaned forward, eyes kind. "What, dear?" "That yacht was supposed to be hope," I whispered. "When Emily mentioned how much she missed our old fishing trips with her father, I thought this would bring us back together. A place to heal, to escape the constant tension Jason created. A sanctuary." My hand brushed against the compass, cool under my palm. I thought if I gave them this, she'd remember who she was, who we were. But instead, my voice broke, but I forced it steady. Instead, it showed me who Jason really is, and maybe who Emily has become with him. Helen's eyes glistened. "You were trying to give them love, and he turned it into a weapon." "Yes." I exhaled shakily. But perhaps that's the gift I didn't realize I was giving. Clarity, proof, evidence that no matter how much you give, some people will never respect you. Paul raised his glass solemnly. "Then let's toast again. Not to truth this time, but to clarity." I lifted my glass, clinking it softly against theirs. "To clarity," I echoed. The wine slid down smooth, warming my chest. The ache remained, of course, but so did a strange peace. Jason's arrogance, his sabotage, his cruelty. Those things had revealed themselves fully today. And in their place, I had gained certainty. I looked out across the water, the horizon glowing orange and gold. The compass gleamed in the dying light, pointing north, steady and true. I whispered to myself, unheard by anyone else, I may have lost a daughter's gratitude, but I've reclaimed my dignity. The evening sun dipped lower, casting long ribbons of gold across the harbor. The Serenity rocked gently, almost soothingly, but the atmosphere on deck was thick as storm clouds. Paul and Helen remained at my side, their presence quiet but steady, as if they knew I needed witnesses for what I was about to say. The sound of hurried footsteps on the dock pulled my eyes forward. Jason and Emily had not gone far. They stood at the end of the pier, shadows long against the water, their bodies tense in silhouette. After a brief, heated exchange, Jason gesturing wildly, Emily clutching her arms around herself, they turned back. Moments later, Jason stormed up the gangway, Emily trailing behind him with tear-streaked cheeks. His swagger was gone, replaced with something harsher, more desperate. He didn't wait for pleasantries. "Maggie," he said, his voice tight, "we need to talk." I remained seated, my hands folded calmly on the table. "We've already talked." "No." He shook his head, his eyes flashing. "You blindsided me. You set me up with those cameras, you—" Paul cut in, his tone like steel. "Jason, don't. You were caught destroying property. Don't pretend otherwise." Jason ignored his father, focusing only on me. "Look, Maggie, I was wrong. I'll admit it, but you can't punish Emily for my mistake. She's your daughter. She deserves this yacht. You can't just—" "I can," I interrupted softly. The words seemed to deflate him, but only for a moment. He recovered quickly, plastering on what he must have thought was sincerity. "Please, Maggie, let's not throw everything away. You wanted us to have this. You wanted to keep the family together. I was out of line, but I'll make it up to you. We'll appreciate it. From now on, I promise." Helen's sigh was heavy, cutting through the air. "Jason, appreciation doesn't come because of money or gifts. It comes from respect, and you've shown none." Jason's jaw clenched. "With respect, Mom, this isn't your decision." "No," Paul said sharply. "It's hers." He turned to me. "Margaret, don't let him twist this." I nodded slowly, my gaze locked on Jason. "You're right about one thing, Jason. This yacht was meant as a gift. I imagined weekends with Emily here, her laughter filling the cabins, maybe even future grandchildren learning to steer by the compass. I wanted it to be a bridge back to my daughter." Emily's eyes filled again, fresh tears spilling. "But gifts," I continued, my voice steady, "are given freely, and they can be withdrawn just as freely. What I saw today, your contempt, your sabotage, your arrogance, showed me something I can't ignore. You don't deserve this gift, not you, and not while you stand beside you." Emily's breath hitched. "Mom, don't say that, please." I turned to her, my heart aching. "Emily, I love you more than anything. But today, you stood by silently while your husband mocked me, destroyed my property, and lied to my face. And when the truth came out, you defended him instead of me. That tells me where your loyalty lies." She shook her head, sobbing. "It's not like that. I didn't know what to do." "You chose," I said quietly. "You chose him, and in doing so, you chose to turn away from me." Jason jumped in, his voice harsh. "She's my wife, Maggie. Of course she chose me. That's what marriage means. Maybe if you respected that—" "Respect?" I snapped. the first true edge of anger breaking through. Respect is earned, and you, Jason, have done nothing but prove you don't understand the word. He glared at me, fists clenched at his sides. So that's it? You're cutting us off? After everything you promised? You're just going to throw Emily aside because you don't like me? No. I drew a deep breath, letting the cool, salt air steady me. I'm protecting myself, and perhaps in time, protecting Emily too. Jason let out a bitter laugh. You think you're teaching me a lesson? Please. We don't need your yacht. We'll get our own. We'll be fine without you. Will you? Paul asked quietly, his eyes piercing. Or will you just find someone else to leech off of? Jason spun toward him, furious, but Helen's soft voice cut through like a knife. Enough. Jason, you've humiliated yourself enough today. Emily's sobs filled the silence. She clutched Jason's arm, her whole body trembling. Mom, please, don't do this. We can change. We can fix it. My voice softened, but I didn't waver. Emily, I wish with all my heart that were true. But I've learned the hardest lesson a parent can learn. Love doesn't fix everything. Sometimes it blinds you to what's right in front of you. And today, I can't let love blind me anymore. I stood, the last rays of sunset painting my face in amber light. The gift is withdrawn. The serenity remains mine. And until respect is restored, you are not welcome on this yacht. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Emily's broken sobs and Jason's sharp breathing. He pulled her roughly toward the gangway. Fine, let's go. Emily lingered one moment, her tearful eyes searching mine. I wanted to reach for her, to hold her like I had when she was a child, to whisper that everything would be okay. But she turned away, following Jason off the yacht and down the pier. I watched them until they were swallowed by the evening crowd, two figures diminished by their own choices. Helen touched my hand gently. You did the right thing. Paul nodded solemnly. Sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same. I closed my eyes, the ache inside me deep and real, but also clean, like a wound finally exposed to air. The compass gleamed at my side, pointing true north. And for the first time in years, I felt as if I, too, was finally facing the right direction. The last echo of Emily's sobs faded with the evening crowd on the pier. I stood at the rail of the Serenity, watching until their figures dissolved into the shadows of parked cars and neon dock lights. The air smelled of brine and diesel, familiar and grounding. My chest felt heavy, yes, but it was no longer the suffocating weight of humiliation. It was the ache of clarity, the ache of letting go. Paul came to stand beside me, his broad shoulders squared, his face unreadable, but his presence steady. They're gone, he said simply. I know, I whispered. My fingers tightened around the brass rail. I just don't know if I lost my daughter forever. Helen's gentle hand touched my arm. She's still your daughter, Margaret, but she's tangled up in him. Sometimes love makes people blind. Maybe one day she'll see. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But I also knew how stubborn Emily could be, how tightly Jason wrapped himself around her life. Still, the seed of hope Helen offered rooted itself in me. Perhaps distance was the very medicine Emily needed. The sun had dropped almost entirely now, the water painted in streaks of indigo and fire. I motioned us back to the table, where the half-finished wine and abandoned plates waited. The salmon had cooled, the vegetables gone limp, but I no longer cared. What mattered was the company that remained. Paul uncorked another bottle, this one a deeper vintage I had been saving for the right moment. He poured 3 glasses, the ruby liquid catching the last flickers of light. He raised his glass, his voice solemn. To character. Helen and I clinked our glasses against his. To character, we echoed. The first sip burned warm and clean down my throat, chasing away the lingering chill Jason had left behind. For the first time all day, I let myself exhale fully. Paul leaned back, swirling the wine. You know, Margaret, I've spent my life negotiating deals, reading people. And I'll tell you something. Today, you taught my son a lesson no business school ever could. Actions have consequences, and arrogance has a price. Helen nodded, her eyes kind but firm. And you reminded all of us that dignity cannot be bought or stolen. Their words settled over me like a balm. For hours I had carried the sting of Jason's contempt, the disappointment in Emily's silence. But here now, with 2 people who saw me clearly, I felt something shift inside. I wasn't just a mother abandoned. I was a woman who had faced betrayal and stood her ground. We moved to the stern of the yacht, carrying our glasses, watching the harbor lights blink on one by one. The water glimmered like molten gold, and the compass beside the helm reflected a steady gleam, its needle pointing north, no matter the chaos around it. I reached out, brushing my fingers against its surface. My husband's voice echoed in memory. When you don't know where you're going, trust this to point you home. Home. I realized then that home was not a place, not even a person. It was the knowledge of who you were when all masks were stripped away. And tonight, I knew. I was a woman who had loved fiercely, given generously, and finally drawn the line where love became exploitation. Helen broke the silence softly. Do you regret it? I thought for a moment, the cool evening breeze ruffling my hair. No, I said finally. It hurts, yes, but regret? No. If Jason had walked away today with this yacht, it would have poisoned everything. Better he loses it now than I lose myself later. Paul raised his glass again in quiet salute. Spoken like a woman who knows her worth. We sat together as the marina settled into night. Laughter from other boats drifted across the water. Families gathered for dinners, friends sharing stories, children shrieking with delight. Once, I had imagined Emily's laughter among them, Jason at her side, all of us sharing something beautiful. But perhaps this was the truer ending. The silence of absence, but also the peace of boundaries finally drawn. As the stars blinked awake in the velvet sky, I whispered a silent prayer. Not for Jason, but for Emily. That one day she would remember the girl who used to sit beside me on a rickety fishing boat, her hair tangled in the wind, her eyes alight with wonder at the sea. That she would find her way back, not to my yacht, not to my money, but to me. Paul and Helen eventually retired to their cabin, leaving me alone on the deck. I poured myself one last glass of wine and leaned against the rail, listening to the gentle lap of waves. The compass caught the starlight, glowing faintly, steady as ever. And there, beneath the night sky, I felt something I hadn't in years. Not victory, not triumph. Something quieter, deeper. Peace. Justice hadn't come through revenge. It had come through revelation. Jason had sabotaged himself with his own arrogance, and Emily had made her choice. Painful, yes, but honest. And honesty, however brutal, was better than illusion. I lifted my glass to the stars. To truth, to clarity, to peace. The words drifted into the night, carried away by the wind, and I knew, whatever storms lay ahead, I would navigate them. The compass would point true, and so would I.